You have found yourself on another episode of Locked On Bulls. On today's episode, we're going to look at Bleacher Report's big board, free agency big board for the Chicago Bulls specifically, and 3 targets that they mentioned for the Chicago Bulls that I could all see making some sense, but we're going to break it down here. We're also going to look at how the Bulls can become players in the free agent market and do a draft profile for somebody who's starting to become one of my favorite prospects in this draft. Doesn't mean the Bulls should necessarily take him into Tidjane Saluan. We're getting into all that and more on today's Locked On Bulls.
You are Locked On Bulls, your daily Chicago Bulls podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another episode of Locked On Bulls, member of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every single day. My name is Haize. You guys can follow me at CEO Haize. Man, I'm host and creator of Chicago Bulls Central and Chicago Bears Central YouTube pages and podcasts. And yes, it is 2 different pages and 2 different podcasts. I'm feeling the best that I have in a few days, y'all. The Dayquil got me alive right now. For those that know, and especially those that follow over on Chicago Bulls Central as well, I've been fighting for my life this whole entire week. I still haven't had solid food, probably in we're going on day 4 of no solid food here for Haize. You know, it is what it is. I'm holding out the best that I possibly can, but it is what it is when it comes down to that. Why do I have on headphones? I have no idea. Maybe I am still a little bit more sick than I thought, but so we're going to go ahead and get into it, man. We want to thank you guys for tuning in. I apologize I was not able to make it on yesterday's episode of Locked On Bulls. I was knocked out sick. I was on my deathbed. But I have about a 4-hour time period every day where I feel as normal as I possibly can. That's where I try to get in all my recording for the day, because it's a crapshoot outside of that. So you guys got me now for when you got me. I'm feeling pretty okay right now. But we're going to jump this show off talking about a list of free agent prospects that Bleacher Report put together. He looked at kind of the most realistic prospects for every single team. And I always, Bleacher Report articles can always be kind of hit or miss in how realistic they are. I do think I understand why they have most of the targets on this list. The number one that they have for the Chicago Bulls is Buddy Hield. Now, when you look at it, the fact of the Chicago Bulls and how terrible our three-point shooting has been as a team over the time, it makes sense. The Bulls over our three-point takes and attempts last season ranked at 27th and 26th. And so that just it wasn't the best. The Bulls sucked at shooting three-pointers on top of us giving up a whole lot of three-pointers. The Bulls lost a lot of games to simple math. Buddy Hield would come in and be an elite three-point shooter, one that the Chicago Bulls have not had in quite a while, even with Kobe White, you know, him and how hot he can get from 3 at times. Alex Caruso having his career year best from 3. Ayo Dosunmu stepping up from 3. Listen, we could use a three-point shooter like Buddy Hield. Buddy Hield is already top 25 all-time in three-point makes. He's 22nd in three-point. I had no idea Buddy Hield was that high on all-time three-point made list. So he brings in something that is a skill set that the Bulls need. When you look at his career, he's a career 40% shooter from three-point range, taking 7.5 three-pointers per game. That is not just decent. That is elite three-point shot making from Buddy Hield. And when you look at the way that his career has been going, he's been playing more off the bench than he has been starting lately. So hopefully he'll be willing to embrace that role with the Chicago Bulls, averaging 12 points per game last season as well. And he still brings almost 4 rebounds per game, over 3 assists per game as well that he brings, almost a steal per game also in that. Buddy Hield would be a player that, with the makeup of how the Chicago Bulls are right now, would be a great addition in free agency for the Chicago Bulls. The question with all these players is, and what we'll address in the second segment here, is how the Bulls can even become players in free agency. But the question would be is, could the Bulls outbid or willing to outbid any teams for Buddy Hield's expertise? With what Buddy Hield brings, even with the teeth and the dental bill that would come with Buddy Hield, he's still going to be somebody that most teams they're going to be teams way better that have a bigger need for three-point shooting for the Chicago Bulls offering Buddy Hield a contract. So it becomes about, does Buddy Hield want to come here versus some of the other teams that he's going to be, asked to come to or be interested in him. And so that's where it becomes a thing at. But as a target in of itself, just baseline as a target, Buddy Hield makes a whole lot of sense for the Chicago Bulls. A lot of Bulls fans were kind of hoping that the Bulls may even look to find a way to bring him in at the trade deadline last year. It didn't happen, but Buddy Hield is one that makes a whole lot of sense for the Chicago Bulls. The next one they had on this list was Caleb Martin. Now, this is, Caleb Martin's an interesting player. Has kind of always been a player that he understands his role, right? And I actually had him on the list, I think, last offseason as well as somebody that the Bulls could look. He's coming off his best scoring season of his career at 10 points per game. He did that on 43% shooting. He still brings some three-point shooting as well. Decent 35% basically three-point shooting, taking 3.5 three-pointers per game. He also chips in 4 rebounds. He's a really good system defender on top of that as well. Caleb Martin is the type of player that I look at and say he's kind of the player that you add when you already have a solid foundation, right? And, not to say that the Bulls don't have somewhat of a foundation, but I don't know if I would call it a solid foundation. Still very shaky, right? We're still kind of trying to identify exactly what's going to happen. But as a versatile forward weapon that can come in, who can shoot the ball some, can do a little bit of scoring for you, but also is going to be a solid defender, good communicator, coming from a really good system as well. If he opts out of that contract, which he does have a player option for $7.1 million, he may be easier to get because the mid-level exception next year is going to be $12.9 million, I believe. So, he's going to be able to get probably close to maybe the full mid-level exception from some teams. So him opting out and declining that player option for $7.1 million seems like it's a likely scenario. I'm sure him and his agent are going to kind of survey the field to see what's available out there. But, I think that Caleb Martin is a solid enough player that I wouldn't be mad if the Bulls added, but to me, it's kind of more like it's more in line with like what we did in adding Torrey Craig this year, who we may lose Torrey Craig. So for example, if Torrey Craig does opt out of his contract and then we replace that by going out and signing a Caleb Martin, I'm not necessarily mad at that, right? I'm not mad at that. You need those type of players on your team. He's much younger at being only 28 years old as well. So I'm not hating that type of move at all. So I want to be clear that I'm not hating it. It's just that if the Bulls need a lot more, and I don't think any of these moves are saying that these are moves that the Bulls make and it just makes their offseason for them. But it's some questions around it is basically what I'm saying and what I'm leaving it at. So, that's what you got to look at as well. And then a guy that's last on this list that they mentioned who's going to be definitely harder to get, and there's questions on if he even gets to hit that free agency market. Is it going to be enough for your mid-level exception? That's Jalen Smith. Now, he has a $5.4 million player option next year that he could decline. His per 36 minutes are out of this world, right? But we don't like to use per 36 here at Locked On Bulls, so I'm not going to focus a whole hell of a lot on that. He's coming off the season where he averaged right under 10 points per game, 5 rebounds per game as well, 1 assist, a half a block per game, 0.3 steals per game. He only played 61 games last year, started 14 of those, and only played 17 minutes. Jalen Smith is 24 years old, still has tremendous upside as well. But to me, before I look at what Jalen Smith is probably going to cost you out in the open market, I'm really just looking at the draft prospects that we have here. And I know people keep saying that this is a weaker draft and things like that, but I like Jalen Smith, but I'd almost be willing to roll the dice where the Bulls are right now, right? I don't see the Bulls doing anything this offseason that is going to turn them into a true contender. So for that, I'd rather kind of focus on, in that case, of getting one of the young, because the Bulls aren't going to have a whole lot of assets at their disposal, which we'll talk about here in the second segment. So because of that, I don't want to see the Bulls kind of spend a lot of money on free agents that aren't going to really up the ceiling of the Bulls, especially at a position that has a lot of depth in it in this draft, right? This is a draft that if you're looking at any positions having the deepest talent-wise is the wing and the big man position, power forwards and centers in this type of draft. So I'm not necessarily looking for the Bulls to maybe make a move for a Jalen Smith type player. I like him as a player, but I don't like him enough to where it's like, I don't think that's the best asset allocation if that's what we do. But again, this is the Chicago Bulls that we're talking about. Has proper asset allocation been anything that they've ever really given us? So I'm not necessarily expecting that either from the Chicago Bulls, but that's Bleacher Report's list of 3 realistic free agent targets right now for the Chicago Bulls, and they all make sense. Now, we know that the Bulls are trying to make changes. They're looking to make changes. They talked about it. We'll see if they can execute it. But I don't know if the needs that we see right now for the Bulls are maybe the needs that the Bulls have by the time we make it to free agency, if they're as active as what people or what AK kind of let on to the Bulls being active this offseason. Could be wrong on that. That remains to be seen, but we'll be talking about it here at Locked On Bulls if they are. But next up, we're going to be talking about how the Bulls can become a free agent destination, not necessarily saying key free, like star free agents, but how can they create some space for themselves to be movers in free agency? But before we do that, I got to talk to you guys about one of our sponsors, and that is LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals, the right professionals for your team faster and for free. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all that while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So many, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats that it may not have the time or resources to hire. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba. Post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. All right, Bulls fans. Thank you guys for staying tuned in with me. Thank you guys for spending a little time with me as well here over on Locked On Bulls, man. The ones that are in the live audience. Your boy's been sick, so it's good to just interact with people because I've been sick and shut in all week. But with that said, man, I want to talk about how the Bulls can become players in free agency. And it's not going to be easy, right? For those that know, I know me and Pat have talked about it a lot. Understanding how free agency works when you get into cap holds and options and all these type of things, the luxury tax versus the salary cap, all those type of things, it can get in the weeds, right? And I think there's a big misunderstanding by some Bulls fans, not all, that the Bulls don't go over the salary cap. The Bulls, like most teams, have been over the salary cap every single year. What the Bulls don't do is pay into the luxury tax, which is different than going over the salary cap. You can go over the salary cap without going into the luxury tax, and that's that gray area that the Bulls like to spend, and they treat the luxury tax as a hard cap. Right now, the Chicago Bulls can have up to $12 million in true cap space, right? That's true ability to go out there, offer that money to free agents. That will come via letting everybody else walk. That means letting DeMar walk, letting Patrick Williams, Andre Drummond, Javonte Green, letting everybody walk. That's not realistic. We know that this Bulls front office isn't one that's going to let everybody go. So that's not an option, right? The Bulls also can have $45 million under the luxury tax, meaning that they're over the salary cap, but they have that space of $45 million over the luxury before they get to the luxury tax they can spend money in. That's where you're going to re-sign your DeMar DeRozans. That's where you're going to re-sign your Patrick Williams. That's why the $40 million offer to DeMar DeRozan is interesting, right? If that is even a true offer, because that would mean that that's basically allowing for all your space under the luxury tax. And that's before you sign Patrick Williams as well, which is why you're seeing things like the Bulls are really focused on moving Zach LaVine. Moving Zach LaVine and what they get back in that deal is going to determine a lot as far as the Bulls spending in free agency. Because if they do find a team, I'm not saying this team is going to be interested, but I'm just throwing this out there. For example, the Orlando Magic, for example, they have $18 million under the salary cap, I believe, so they can absorb $18 million of Zach LaVine's contract without having to match that portion. So that means that would give the Bulls $18 million back in spending power. Again, that could allow them to also sign Patrick Williams, things like that, right? So that's one way that the Bulls can become free agent players this year. Letting DeMar DeRozan walk, that goes a long way in it as well. Not saying that they do that, but that's one of the options there. And then you have the option to waive and stretch Lonzo Ball. Now, waiving and stretching Lonzo Ball would mean stretching his salary out. I believe it's over 3 years. They'd have to pay him, I think it's a little over $3 million each one of those years, but the rest of that money becomes available to the Bulls kind of fluctuate in. So the Bulls, when we say things like the Bulls can't realistically bring everyone back, it's because if they want to field an actual NBA team out there, they can't. Now, if they want to run with 12 players, then maybe they can keep more guys around than that, but it's going to be difficult, right? So the Bulls to really get involved in even just using their mid-level exception. And that's where it's so dangerous where the Bulls are right now, is that if they just want to have their mid-level exception available after signing both DeMar and Patrick Williams, they are going to have to hope that a team takes Zach LaVine and they don't match a third to a half of, they don't have to match a third to a half of his salary. And then that still leaves the option of potentially letting a Torrey Craig walk away, letting a Drum walk away, right? Maybe even having to still waive and stretch Lonzo Ball. So it's going to get a bit, the maneuvers of this front office this offseason so that they can try to have a full roster out there is going to be very interesting to see. Now, in a potential Zach LaVine trade, you're bringing bodies back, right? Maybe you're bringing 2 players back in a Zach LaVine trade, maybe 3, right? We'll see. If you do that, then that helps you fill out the rest of that roster, right? That helps you. You're whereas one spot was taken up, you're filling that now with 2 spots, maybe 3, right? So that helps you have more than 12 men on your roster there also. So that may be something that the Bulls are also kind of weighing in this offseason period, is to try to see and gauge exactly what they're going to get back for Zach LaVine, because that's going to help them determine what they're going to be able to do out there. And so, you know, it's easy to say as fans, and this is one thing that on this side of the camera, right, I always have to say to myself, it's easy for me to look up the salary cap, to look up contracts, to look up cap holds and all this type of thing and say, oh, bam, if you just move this domino to here and you move that to here, you move that over here, boom, you got $13 million in cap space. But it's not always that easy, right? And so you also have to look at future opportunities. And so it really bridges the thing of what is this focus of the Bulls front office this offseason. I, for one, am somebody who would love to see the Bulls kind of more so focus on the 2025 draft, future cap flexibility, because you don't have any right now, right? But the 2025 draft is probably the next time that the Bulls could realistically add a franchise-changing talent. And the reason why I say that, Zach LaVine trade, you're not getting the star-level talent back per what we've heard. We haven't been, well, we're not going to have the salary cap space to bring in a star here. But even if we did, we have not been a star destination in free agency for so long. Shout out to signing Lonzo Ball, DeMar DeRozan, and Alex Caruso. That's the best thing we've had to a great offseason in a decade plus, right? So because of that, we're not really in that position to really try to make ourselves or view ourselves as this player in free agency. So to me, cap flexibility is important, because then that allows you to keep your space to keep your players. You got to prepare. If Kobe White and Ayo keep on the trajectory that they're on, they're going to get nice contracts, right? And they're on reasonable contracts now. The good thing about them being on reasonable contracts now is that even their max, when they are in free agency again, still going to be fairly reasonable, because you're going to, what is it, 120% of what your last year of your contract was. So, you know, hopefully the Bulls are prepared to do that, right? But ultimately, it just comes down to what is really the focus this offseason. With the change that AK has talked about, what do you want to bring with that change? Is it that you want to get flexibility to where you can make some maneuvers out there, you can get a little bit more creative in free agency? Is it that you're looking at that 2025 draft and saying we need as many bites at the apple in that draft that we can get it? But, you know, ultimately for the Bulls to do anything meaningful in free agency, it means one of 3 things. Zach's gone, DeMar's gone, or Lonzo's gone. Well, off the books, because he hasn't really been there. Any one of those 3 things adds tremendous flexibility for the Bulls. Any combination of those two out of those 3 things adds that much more in the future as well for the Bulls. So They got to make that decision. Is it tough? Yeah. Do I make it sound easier than what it is in reality? Yeah, that's kind of my job, though. It is what it is. I don't have to stress over it. I'm not AK, but this team it's going to be fun, I should say, in the sense of just watching how this front office maneuvers this offseason, because they said they want to bring change, and we'll see what that change brings about. But next up, we're going to be looking at a draft profile for a player that I like more and more that I watch his tape, and that is Tidjane Saluan. But before we get into that, I got to talk to you guys about one of our sponsors, and that, of course, is BetterHelp. This show is brought to you by BetterHelp as well. We all carry around different stressors, big and small. When we keep them bottled up, it can start to affect us negatively. Therapy is a safe space to get things off your chest and to figure out how to work through whatever's weighing you down. If you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. You guys know me and Pat are big proponents of therapy here. I've talked to you guys about my thing when I lost my brother, other things that went on in my life. I did have to seek out therapy, and it helped. It helped me be this goofy, fun, joyous, red-bitted guy that you guys see in front of you 5 times a week. But with that said, BetterHelp is done entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time with no additional charge. Get it off your chest with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA to get started on your mental health journey. Guys, make sure you guys check out BetterHelp. We appreciate you there, man. With that said, y'all, guys, thank you again for tuning in to another episode of Locked On Bulls, guys. We appreciate you so much around these parts. I want to talk to you guys about Tidjane Saluan, and this is one of those opportunities I did wish that for the YouTube side we can show highlights, things like this. Maybe I'll put it in the description so you guys can go and find his tape, because this is a player that has tons of promise, right? And some people have called him potentially the Giannis Antetokounmpo out of this draft, meaning that a guy that's really raw, that's really talented, that ends up being the best player out of this draft. And oddly enough, some mocks have him slated to go 15, where I think exactly where Giannis was drafted as well. But the Bulls have to ask themselves the question, right? And this is where the conversation on best available, potential, or position of need, right? Those 3 things, when you ask those questions, a player like Tidjane Saluan may make you lean towards potential, because this guy has tremendous, tremendous upside. Still an extremely raw player at only 18 years old. He'll be 19 here soon, 19 most of his rookie year. His off-ball defense, already amazing. He can play multiple positions. He can guard 1 through 4. He projects to guard at the NBA level. This guy is such a nuisance off ball that you have to look at him and say that he has potential, that you can see him being one of the best defenders in the league when it's all said and done. He uses his length. He uses his quickness. He has the mindset. 6'9", 7'1" wingspan. We know AK likes his wingspan, right? He's coming off his best season shooting 3-pointers. So if you're looking at that offensive upside and him in to kind of round out his game, he's starting to show you that he can do that as well. He cuts, moves off the ball, moves with screens. He's a solid enough passer as well. Point forwards are the way that the league is going right now. He's starting to learn how to create his own shot as well. And the reason why I point these things out is that when you're drafting in the NBA, potential is always part of that analysis, right? Is what can this guy potentially be? It's different when they're already starting to show the ability to round out those skills. He's really starting to turn into a shot creator. Now, coming to the NBA with different level of athleticism, you can start worrying about those things a little bit more. He needs to improve on the decision-making. If the Bulls are going to be this offense that likes to get out and run in transition, he can attack right away with that, right? While you're waiting on the shot creation and things to come around and be solid for him. Great finisher around the rim. Also, he can finish with lobs. He runs hard on fast breaks, stuff like that. He also can pass on the fast break if he leads it some as well. Then when you look at some of the negatives for a player like him, you notice I talked a lot about off-ball defense. Great off-ball defender. On-ball defense, it's not bad, but you can tell it's still a work in progress for him. But he has all the mechanics, all the fundamentals, all the makeup of a really good on-ball defender. But listen, there's some questions there. I said he's starting to show the ability to create his own shot, but that's still kind of a concern. There's that he's not doing that consistently yet, right? So that's something that you worry about with as well. He's coming off his best season as a three-point shooter. So if you're looking for that consistent success there, it just hasn't been there yet for him. So those are also things that you have to worry about there as well. And he can be turnover prone at times. But if you're looking at upside, he has one of the biggest upsides of anybody in this draft period. He just does. He has great, tremendous upside, and I would not be surprised if he turns out to be one of the better players out of this draft. And even in a weaker draft, if he's one of the guys that ends up turning into a star in this draft. Now, some people are going to say, well, Haize, he's not necessarily at a position of need. He can play the power forward. He's not really projected to be a center. You're right there. People could also say, well, Haize, we also need somebody. We've done a lot of potential. We got potential in Dalen Terry, potential in Patrick Williams, potential in Julian Phillips. Let's go with a more surefire thing. And I don't knock you guys at all there. That is why I said kind of in the intro that I like the guy a whole hell of a lot. I still don't know if I really think the Bulls should draft him. I won't be mad if the Bulls draft him. I just don't know if he's a guy that I would say that I would be mad if the Bulls passed up on, I guess is the better way to word that, right? So you have to have, if you're going to go potential though, and this is something that the Bulls seem like they're moving towards. You have your player development department. You've gotten 2 lead assistant coaches here in Dan Craig and Wes Unseld Jr., who have a reputation of being really good coaches and helping players develop. So maybe going high potential in that type of move isn't bad. Maybe that's not a bad thing, right? But I think overall that is what you're looking at, is that you have to play that potential card versus best player available versus position of need. And so Tidjane Saluan is somebody who is projected to be there at number 11, right? There are some mocks that have him going top 10, but most have him going after the Bulls pick at number 11. Will the Bulls pass him up is the question that you asked there. And that's what I'm going to present to you guys. I'd love for you guys to leave in the comment section how you guys feel about Tidjane Saluan. Like I said, I would implore you to go look at his tape as well. It's a guy that I really like. I like him more and more as I see his tape. I just don't know if the Bulls are going to go that direction. The Zach LaVine trade could determine a lot of that as well, because they end up getting all kind of wing players back, or maybe they do get a young center back in that. Maybe it changed. This is one of those drafts, though, that I did wish the Bulls had a second-round pick. I really do wish the Bulls had a second-round pick in this draft. But listen, that's my thought process on Tidjane Saluan. You guys can let me know what you guys think is always down below. That's my time for today, guys. Make sure you guys are following us at Locked On Bulls. You can follow me at CEO Haize. You can follow Pat at Pat the Designer. We are the number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls, man. Now, that's Chicago Bulls Central, but we're kind of it too, because I'm here as well. Locked On Bulls is free and available on every podcasting app and platform of your choice, as well as YouTube and the Odyssey app. For Pat the Designer, I'm Haize. This has been Locked On Bulls, man. We out of here. I love you guys, y'all. Peace.